Hello, everyone, and welcome to Canadians with Disabilities and Their Allies. My name is Brent. I'm the host, and today I have Dan Davies joining me. And Dan is actually from the BC United Party. Dan is actually the MLA for Peace River North. He's the opposition critic for Ministry of Social Development and Poverty Reduction. Dan, this is an awesome pleasure having you join our show today. Thank you for coming on.
My pleasure, Brent. Thanks for having me. Thanks for inviting me. Finally, connecting and making this work after I don't know how long.
Yeah, you're the first one from your party to come on. So
yeah, there we go.
And we should say, since Brent relaunched on the new format, on the YouTube format, you're officially show number 20.
Number 20. Yeah. Number 20.
Yeah.
And what are we calling this? The video cast, right?
The video cast, yeah.
Video cast, podcast, and anyone watching live, we'll be doing a quick questions and answers session just before Dan leaves for the day. So just get your questions ready and we'll do our best to answer your questions. So Dan, let's dive right in here. So as an opposition critic, can you let the listeners know what, just maybe they're not familiar, what is your role as an opposition critic for the Ministry of Social Development and Poverty Reduction?
Yeah, for sure. First of all, I'm going to apologize. My voice is raspy. Of course, anybody that's out in BC knows that we're in the epicenter of fires up here. So you probably can't quite see out my window, but it is just completely smoked in right now. So hopefully my voice holds on for the next 30 minutes.
Definitely won't see the sun.
Yeah, no, not anytime soon. But to your question, Brent, as the opposition critic, and we're actually now adopting new language. The shadow minister for the social development and poverty reduction is our new title.
Okay.
Yeah, but we're still the critics, basically. My role in the legislature as the opposition party, and what we do with each ministry. So each ministry within the legislature has a shadow minister, just like in the federal government, just like across Canada. And our role is to look at legislation that is being introduced, whether it's within the Ministry of Social Development and Poverty Reduction. Then it certainly becomes my role as the shadow minister for that ministry to look at that legislation, to criticize it, making sure that it works here up in Fort St. John, where I am right now. It works down in Vancouver. It works all over. It's good for people. Talking to advocates across, like yourself and others, and then bring those concerns and questions and issues forward in the legislature when we're debating such bills. Of course, even outside of the Ministry of Social Development and Poverty Reduction, there's many bills that come into play, might be introduced by Children and Families Ministry or Education, or Attorney General, you name it, across the board, that often, as you can imagine, social development and poverty reduction touch points are throughout the different ministries on different things. So, my role again in that regard is to look at all pieces of legislation that come through the legislature. And if there's a component within my shadow ministry, again, is to put that lens on, that critical lens, to make sure that it's good and moves forward. The other piece as well is to generally, just as my role is to, again, reach out to folks like yourselves and many other groups that are out there, and have the conversations, engage with, organizations, CLBC and others here in this province. And, to be looking again at what is government doing that is good, bad, good, could be improved upon, and so on and so forth. So that's kind of, a high level look at what the opposition critic or shadow minister does.
It sounds it's got a very Marvel feel to it, doesn't it?
I'll go with that.
The shadow knows.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
The dark shadows. Sounds almost like out of a Batman comic.
Yeah.
Exactly. And with the rates that people on disability assistance receive in the province of British Columbia, they're obviously, as we all know, I mean, this is going across the country, but the cost of living in British Columbia is, as we know, really is high. And so the rates are definitely not even matching the cost of living. It's well below the poverty line. And in many cases, people will say, how can you say legislated poverty? But hey, you call it what it is. I mean, it is legislated poverty, and nobody should be living in legislated poverty. And I know that the rates have to be increased, and there's a lot of call for federal government to step in and do their part, and maybe possibly as a top up. I don't know where it's going. But in the meantime, the province obviously has an opportunity, I would think, to immediately correct the rates up to a standard. I mean, to a standard with people with disabilities. I mean, their costs are even more than just the basic. They call it poverty line. So people with disabilities, their rates. I mean, their needs are actually even higher. The costs. So what is your take on that, Dan?
Yeah, well, and at the start of your comment there, looking across the province, and we spoke about this offline a couple of minutes ago, just briefly, things look different all across this province. Mm-hmm. Someone living, on PWD, it looks different here in Fort St. John. Then obviously it looks very different in Victoria, where you are. Others that live in Vancouver, it looks very different. And I think, and I'll be honest, I'm going to precursor all of this. I don't have the silver bullet, all the answers, obviously, right? So we need to work together. This is a society issue. The federal government needs to be a partner at the table, as does, our communities, all levels of government need to be at the table to be working through this. We need to be, and more importantly, we don't need to just be sitting at the table as government making decisions. We need you guys at the table helping us make good decisions. Because at the end of the day, and how often do you see this? I mean, this is across the board with government. We know better. We're going to make a policy here. And then you hear from everybody down below. It's like, good God, what are you doing? It doesn't work. We need to change that. We need to have more engagement with people that are being impacted and find out, how do we do things better? We know the challenges. I mean, there's no doubt that there's challenges, people living on PWD right now. Especially when we look at the unbelievable inflation that we've been seeing here just this past year. I mean, it has impacted everybody at all scales, especially people, in the vulnerable population, people on PWD are because you guys are on a fixed income. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't fluctuate for that inflation. So we need to be looking at different things to do to improve the rates, to improve how they are being dispersed. Looking at even the caps on how much you can earn elsewhere. Mm-hmm. Why are we penalizing? When you're working a part-time job somewhere and you hit the cap, and now it's clawing it back dollar for dollar. How do we look at ways to not keep you? And I'm talking you, the collective. Yeah. Keep you like, why do we want to keep you in poverty in that cycle? Let's give you the tools and help you move forward.
Like for me, I mean, I don't know if you know about this bit about me, Dan, but I have been fighting the clawback to my survivor's pension for almost 10 years now. My first wife passed away, and they just invalidate it completely. And it's like, why? And like you were talking about, other ministries being responsible for different pieces of legislation. And if we take the Ministry of Labor, for example, the BC Ministry of Labor, I mean, there's so much legislation in there that protects pensions, right? I mean, they protect pensions like there's no like everybody's business. It's just like they protect it like tooth and nail. And yet, you take the pension over to the Ministry of Disabilities or the Ministry of Social Development, and they disrespect it, and then they claw it back. And it's like, how can you do that? Just from one ministry, it's protected, and the other ministry, they cross it over, and it's like, sorry, we're going to disrespect it now. And it's like, why?
Yeah.
Well, and I don't understand that. I just don't understand it.
Yeah, and you're spot on, Neil, and sorry about all the circumstances, obviously, and my condolences to you. That's just one of many absurdities that are happening. And the other one, we were I think when we were out in the front lawn, I don't know, a month ago, I guess it was, when Jeff had his the tent out there and everything else, hearing from folks, and I've heard this before as well, and I actually brought it up during our budget estimates, penalizing people for love. When two people get together and move in together, you're penalized. You would think that you would be able to combine your supports and try and make better, but the system doesn't fully allow for that. So things like that, how do we look at improving those? And they seem very simple to make better, but how do we, instead of keeping people in poverty, how do we propel you out of it? And I think those are the discussions and things that we really need to look at. And everybody understands, there's budgetary restraints, there's those challenges, but there is a path forward. There is a smarter way to do things. There's, I'm going to go on a little side tangent here, and excuse me if I do, but I'm going to do it anyway.
That's okay.
My biggest concern, and I promise I won't get too partisan, as best I can. Of course, I live in that world of partisanship.
It's all good.
It's all good. I am a true believer in British Columbia's natural resource sector, whether it's our natural gas, our forestry, our mining, the endless opportunities that British Columbia has, and there's no other place in the world that does resources as environmentally responsible. They're just the way to do it. We are the gold standard for the world. At the same time, all of these revenues bring in billions and billions of dollars of revenue into the province of British Columbia. We need those revenues if we are going to fix all of the issues, whether it be the PWD issues or our health or educate, whatever. Those revenues are needed. Absolutely necessity. What worries me is in this last budget, and this is in the government's own budget books, are calling for massive 32% reduction in revenues from the natural resources sector, because they're making it harder and less open for businesses to be attracted to British Columbia to come and do business here. So when you're knowingly taking billions of dollars out of the province's revenue, what does that trickle-down effect look like for supports for people with disabilities, supports for people with, within the children and families ministry, our healthcare, which is in absolute crisis right now, education for our children, looking out for our seniors? That trickle-down effect we haven't seen yet, but if it doesn't get corrected soon, we're in trouble. We're absolutely in trouble. And I think the key to going back, and I talk too much. I know I talk too much. The key to, I think, the success and making life better for people with disabilities, life better for people that are in poverty, life better for people that are living on the streets, and there's far too many, is to make sure that British Columbia maintains a strong resource sector. We are open for business. Obviously, we need the checks and balances in place. Don't get me wrong. And we have those. But if we don't have that revenue coming, we cannot support people. And this is the one thing that worries me about the NDP government right now is, they good ideas, but the money needs to come from somewhere.
Hmm.
And when you start seeing those revenues predicting by the government dropping that much, where are they going to make it up? You
Yeah.
know, and so that's a big worry. And I know that's a big roundabout long answer to your question, but you know, we understand there is more need. We know that.
Mhm.
We need a
Well,
path forward to fix it. And part of that path forward is a strong economy in British Columbia. And the foundation of British Columbia's economy, I don't care what anybody says, is the resource sector.
mhm.
I
Well,
agree. I agree with that.
well, especially with the high cost, also the high cost of rents across the province and across this country. In BC, they're saying that Vancouver is now rated as the worst place to even try and think about renting. $2,800 a month in Vancouver. Victoria is not far behind Vancouver in that. I would say it's almost equal. I mean, the stats show that. I mean, it could be $1 difference, but Vancouver beats them. And that's just for a one bedroom.
Yeah.
And so when I look at the headlines and I'm thinking, wow, so PWD get $375, they get a $125 increase as of July 19th. I'm thinking, well, that's 500. That's not even going to, maybe, I don't know, you could rent a washroom if you're lucky. I don't know.
Well, that's one of the pieces that we talked about on your last show with Shane, Brent, is this idea of maybe what should happen is that the government do away with the shelter portion and just just cut one check of support and do away with, I mean, it would solve everything, but it would be a step forward in the right direction, I believe, if they just had one amount and not be discriminatory on this is how much for shelter and this is how much for support, because you and I both know that just having the $375 for shelter for so long doesn't really cut it. I mean, and now they've increased it, or they will increase it, but the idea of like one check for everything is a better path forward, in my opinion.
Yeah, because like in that view is I know that in BC housing, their rent is geared to income. So because according to when the ministry told me, when I was talking to once upon a time one of the ladies in one of the offices there, and she said, well, unfortunately, because people who live in market housing, they get that shelter portion. They don't qualify for BC housing type of rent geared to income. And that was her view at the time. And I'm like, wow, like it was coming from an administration within the office. And she said, if they were to get rid of that, now things could change where now PWD and market housing could technically, it depends on the government though, whoever the government of the day is, who they could now extend those programs over, because you got seniors who get the SAFERs, you got the RAP, which is the Residential Assistance Program. They could actually put one in there for PWD and call it whatever, a new name, something similar, and extend it over where they could still live in the housing that they want to live in. They don't have to move, and they could still get a subsidized housing within, well, market housing.
Yeah.
So what's your take on that, Dan?
Yeah, so this is one of our, the BC United major priorities going forward, is housing. Housing, it's a crisis right now. And I'm just looking here, and this from the latest BC Coroner's report, revealed homelessness has increased. Since the homelessness has increased, there's been an increase of 75% in deaths among those that are unhoused, okay, which is absolutely unacceptable. There are options. We need more supply for housing, bottom line. And this is one of our major, and this will be one of our major components in the next election campaign, whatever that might be between now and October 2024. Is to look at how do we do housing better. And I know Kevin Falcon, our leader, is he comes out of that world. A lot of it is giving municipalities the tools that they need to do permitting and get things built faster. Government, it will obviously play a significant role in that. You talked about the average rent in Victoria. I mean, you look and it's across BC. You know, the average rent right now in BC is $2,500.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know, that just over last year, that's up almost 12% over last year alone on average rents right across the board.
Mhm.
So when you're talking about this, the inflation challenges, and you know, there was a survey done just recently as well. You know, 50% of all British Columbians are worse off than they were last year. So things aren't getting better. You know, and what was the other number here? Oh, almost half of all British Columbians are 200. This is everybody.
Yeah.
Right. So when I say everybody in British Columbia, 50% of British Columbians are $200 away from insolvency every month.
Wow.
That's crazy.
That then is magnified.
Yeah.
With
And if you're on lower income, that's even worse. Yeah.
People in the vulnerable, you know, people with vulnerabilities like that is even more. So we need to do something. We need to come forward with a plan forward. And, you know, Neil, you were talking, and I think, you know, we were talking again just briefly offline earlier. Housing, you know, looking at doing things differently. You know, obviously, we are going to be looking at doing housing better and supporting people that need the supports they need. You know, maybe it is we just look at housing's here. Here's your living needs, the necessities. You know, because let's be honest, people should not have to be choosing. All right, am I doing my medication this month or is it food?
Right.
You know, those are not decisions that British Columbians should have to make.
Yeah.
So
we need. What was the old saying? Rob Peter to pay Paul. You know what I mean? Like taking medicine versus food. Like,
well, and you know, we need to do things better. And I go back to, this is a society's issue. We need to be, you know, we need all hands on deck to come up with solutions. And all hands on deck is all levels of government. We need the public with us. We need people living with these issues, you know, the affordability challenges, to be giving us ideas and be working with them moving forward. And, you know, these are all, like I say, looking at the housing, you know, supplement piece.
Well,
it's an issue. It's another, and it's another level of bureaucracy.
Yeah.
You have in, you know, what does that alone cost to manage these different streams of supports? I mean, they all got an office. They all got a staff of who knows how many government employees that are administering all these pieces. I mean, there is significant cost. So we need to do things smarter and better and more efficient.
And the other thing too is, like, I know in the 70s and 80s, the federal government used to be pretty heavily invested in building housing, right? I mean, they had a huge amount of investment in housing stock back in the 70s and 80s, and then everybody just kind of walked back from that, and that kind of screwed over all the provinces, right? I mean, the fact that the federal government just kind of said, oh, we don't need to worry about that anymore, and they just kind of wiped their hands of it, and that's kind of really screwed people over, right? All the provinces. And
you know, and there was a great, you know, and again, something to look at, and this is something I know that we've talked about again. And if you remember back in the 70s and 80s, I certainly am of that age. I was younger there. I had hair.
Yeah.
Co-op housing.
Yeah.
Co-op housing. It was one of the most successful housing plans in the province of British Columbia. And, you know, those were partnerships. There was federal money there. That was under the old social credit government. You know, there was provincial money there. And, you know, we still have one here in Fort St. John. And there's a bunch of them still throughout the province that run with great success. And, you know, the rents are affordable. They're kept affordable. But, you know, so again, we just need to look at being innovative, you know, doing things smarter. And instead of doing things over and over and over again and expecting, and I said this earlier, you know, doing things over and over again, expecting different results every time is insanity.
Yeah.
We need to do things different.
Dan, Sonia actually has a question for you.
Okay.
And here's Sonia.
Hi, Dan.
Oh, a live question. Oh my goodness.
Live question, yeah. Well, you can peek over there if you want. Yeah, so way you can. Oh, you just there you go. You just check. There you are. That way Dan can see you. There you are.
I don't know if you can see me.
Yep, lean over. There you are. Okay.
You got to lean in. The camera's got to see you.
Get a little closer.
Okay, there you are.
There you go.
Hi.
Hi, Sonia. Good to see you.
Good to see you. My question is, okay, so back in February 28th, the ministry gave $125 to the shelter portion, and that won't take effect till July 19th, which is too long to wait. Anyway, my question is, how come they didn't give any financial money to the support portion, which is what they've always done in the past?
Yeah. Well, I can't answer why government did whatever they did. I mean, of course, I'm not privy to that. I'm on the other side, on the opposition side. But, you know, I've been a big advocate, and we've been a big advocate right at the very start. And, you know, back when, and it was a good thing, and it was unanimously voted on in the BC legislature, you know, the COVID supports, the $300 supplement, which was a good thing, a great start.
Oh, that was the best.
You know, and then, of course, toward the end of COVID 21, it was clawed back. And that sparked a huge conversation. And, you know, in fact, that was when I was first appointed to this critic role. I was the education critic before. So that was Dan, you're the SDPR critic. And they took $300 away from PWD. I was like, here we go.
Yeah,
I remember all of a sudden you had a dartboard on your back, right?
All of a sudden. Well, hey,
I remember that.
Nicholas Simons.
That's true, yeah.
It's on his back.
Yeah, that's true.
I remember media interviewing us at the time, and they were doing a story on what would happen, the impact of taking away $300, the COVID supplement. What would happen to you? And they said, Brent, what would happen to you if they took it away? And they asked Sonia the same thing. She said she couldn't buy her nutritional supplements that she needs, extra things to help her diabetes, her health, you know, she's got a heart condition too. So they asked me,
it goes back to the, am I eating this month, or am I buying my medication that keeps me alive? And
so when they asked me what would happen for your residency, what would happen? I go, well, my landlord says, you know, based on my income, I could still live where I'm living. And they said, well, okay, what would happen if we took it away? Or they clawed back maybe even 175 of it, which they did. Right?
We'd have to move.
I said we would have to move because we wouldn't be able to afford projecting inflation going forward. We have to then sacrifice and go to a different place. Well, luckily for us, actually, luckily for Sonia, she actually found a place here in Victoria. And so it was $410, Dan, cheaper than what we were paying. We were paying $17.75 in Langley. And so she found it for $13.65 out here. It took quite a while for us to kind of get used to everything. And I think we're getting used to it. I mean, was it ultimately where we wanted to live? No, because, so here's the thing, the because part is, so we applied around to a whole bunch of places while we were still living in a brand new condominium that was built. We saw it getting built. We thought, wouldn't it be nice to live here? Yay. And the landlord says, yeah, no problem. As long as you pay your rent and you pay it on time, no problem. You know, here's the keys. So yeah, I mean, great. Problem is that we realized that they take away the supplement, we're going to have to move. So what happened with it is we applied around for different corporate landlords. One said, yeah, no problem. We take people with disabilities. And that was a long shot, long story short. But Sonia wanted to look at her hometown because her parents live in Nanaimo. We thought, hey, you know, why don't we first try Nanaimo? Right?
Nothing. I couldn't find anything. Nothing.
But the landlord said, no problem at first. Now, they said, well, look at your income. Okay. They didn't respond back. Our landlord said, I didn't get any phone calls. What's going on? So I finally phoned back because here's the sad part was, Dan, we gave our notice in because we figured we were going to get the place because I had talked to them on the phone. They said, no problem. Like, yeah, like we rent to people with disabilities. Is your income? No problem. They said, yeah, they even told us, give your notice in your landlord. I mean, like, yeah, well, you know, we can move. When do you want to move in? I go, next month, because we'll give our 30 days. And so we gave it in. We had to revoke our notice to end tenancy. we scrambled around because they said we can't rent to you because your income is not high enough. You need to be making at least $2,500 each per month. And I'm like, say what? They said basically because, in other words, your income has to be closer to $100,000. I'm like, oh my God, like I didn't understand. So long story short, we applied at a whole bunch of places. We kept getting told the same thing. Langley Apartments, same thing, big company. They called our landlord for a reference. They called twice. They did, and then their head office did. And so she says, yeah, like rent to them. Like she said, yeah, a good reference. Rent to these two. They're awesome people, great advocates. They want to see changes for the disability community going forward, get people into housing. And they went rent to us because same thing. And I said, well, our landlord will go down to $2,000, lowest they'll go. I go, there's no way the government's going to give us an increase up to $2,000 each. So we found a place in Victoria, and that's where we're at. And that's why I really ramped up advocacy going forward, because I don't want to see anyone go through the headache and the stress that we had to go through. And thank God for our landlord.
And Dad, I have my doctors in Langley.
Yeah.
So, like,
yeah.
I have
And
to talk.
it's not like you can just walk in and get a family doctor in British Columbia.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, at least we were able to revoke our notice, and they only understood. But we knew going forward our time was limited, so we had to relocate. And at least, hey, one good thing, we're closer to the legislature.
Well, and I was thinking that actually,
right.
You get to see me for the odd time, and you wouldn't do that in Langley. So I'm glad you moved to Victoria. We have a friendship now, so that has worked out. But like I said, I hear you and absolutely sympathize with you, and you're not alone. I mean, this story plays out in every community across British Columbia, across Canada, undoubtedly. And we looked at, and just going back to the earlier conversation around the clawback, this is one thing that we have talked about. We still are advocating. I brought it up. You heard unquestioned budget estimates. At minimum, get that $300 back in the pockets of everyone.
Oh yeah, it's imperative that it has to be restored. I mean, it can be done immediately, right? I mean, they don't even have to even sit in the legislature to do it, right? Or do they? Or
well, hey, and here's my little jab. The ministers all got a $10,000 raise,
right?
Just saying.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. The PWD or people on income assistance, they have to sacrifice so many things in order to plead with their landlord. Like, and they get a rent increase notice. So here's the thing too. Since we've been living in this place, we got a rent increase notice. There was no increase on the disability supports like last year. And then we got another rent increase notice, which now took effect as of June 1st. Now we just got paid. So now our new rent, we actually had just paid the new amount. But the increase that we get in July 19th takes effect after. And so I brought it to my landlord, and she's such a lovely lady. And she says, well, how does that work? So you've had 2 increases in rent, but they haven't increased, the support or the shelter. And I go, wow. She said, okay, like you need to tell them, they need to get with the program and start listening to you guys. I mean, we're here to collect the money. It doesn't matter how we get it, as long as you pay that rent at the end of the day, no problem. So going forward, like it is, a message to the government, please listen to the disability community and listen to lived experience because and I mean, and listen to the minister too. I mean, opposition critic, like listening to our voices, carrying it forward. Like, and I know that a lot needs to be done, but we all need to obviously work together collaboratively and make a better system for all.
Yeah,
we're coming to the end of the half hour, so I just wanted to say there should be final comments. I did want to quickly mention we have a Dan in the comments as well. Okay. From Toronto, and you know who that is, right, Brent?
Yep.
But he actually made a couple comments about NRGI, which is National Rent Geared to Income. He says that should be one of the things to look at, and he says that everybody should only have to contribute 30% of their income to housing. That should be the target goal for everyone.
And yeah, I guess it's like BC Housing. I know they call it RGI Housing out in Ontario. There's different providers.
Yeah, and we do have some similar pieces that are the same here in British Columbia, and you know but you know, looking at the 30% of your wage, I mean, we do need to set goals, and we need to strive to do better. And I think, you know, and I'm going to move into my wrap up comments, Neil, like you suggested. The bottom line is we need to do better, and I think we can all agree with that. And Brent, your last kind of wrap up comment that you just mentioned is, you know, working with people with lived experience. Governments need to do that better in everything, especially within PWD. You know, it can't come from just high up on the mountain and just be disseminated. Good luck, you know, with people that don't have the understanding, with people that don't have the lived experience. To me, having your voice, the big U, at the table is absolutely imperative, so that we can make sure that we are doing good sound policy. We also need to, and I shouldn't say we, the government needs to do a better job, I think, at looking inwards at itself. How does it become more efficient at delivering the supports and services that British Columbians need? How does it become more efficient at delivering the supports that people with disabilities need? And, you know, we talked about, you know, looking at the different silos of support. And you know, some of them aren't even within the Ministry of Social Development. They come from other ministries. And, you know, which again, is that efficient? I don't think so. You know, is there an added cost with that bureaucracy? I guarantee there is. So how do we do it better? How does government do it better? How does government better deliver the services that are needed? How does government do it better to make sure that people have access to the services? One thing we hear all the time is it's not easy to even go through the application process and figure out all the paperwork and go to the different websites and to even know what you're eligible for. You know, how do we make that easier for people that have the need? And that's our job as a government. That's the job of the legislature. And we need to do better. We need to have these voices at the table, and let's get it done. And that's my commitment as a BC United MLA. That's, I know our leader, Kevin Falcon's commitment is to do better. And we can do better, because better is possible.
Maybe to get Brent at the table, you should carry around a life-size cardboard cutout of Brent. Just bring him along to the table and sit him beside you there.
Well, that might get creepy.
No, hey, anything's possible, right? I mean,
yeah.
You know, it's the view is that you give people the resources, the opportunity, the resources. They're going to put it back into the economy. They're going to put it back into the community that they live in. And so, and then the small businesses will prosper. If they want to be an entrepreneur, give them that opportunity. There's so much, endless.
The economy is a big circle.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I agree wholeheartedly. So, but you know, let's keep this conversation going.
Yes.
You know, I expect I will see you. I will continue to see you, which, you know,
you will.
And you know, to both of you, and I follow you both on Twitter. You know, you guys are great advocates. And, you know, I just want to thank you and the many others out there, you know, not just in British Columbia, but across Canada, that are out there advocating for better. And, you know, without your voices, we don't move the needle. So you guys are integral in moving that needle and making sure things are getting better. So my hats off to you.
Well, thank you, Dan.
Yeah, and thank you, Dan. And we'll definitely do a follow-up. I'll have you back on the show. I'll reach out to you.
Awesome. All right. Yeah. Thanks, guys. Have a wonderful summer. And no, it's still smoky outside. So I was hoping it might have disappeared, but I'm going to head out and lots of work to do up here in the Peace Country.
Okay.
Thanks, Dan.
Bye,
Thank you, Dan.
Bye, guys. Bye, Sonia.